What made it work really well is that Claude Code has access to everything that an engineer does at the terminal. Everything you can do, Claude Code can do. There's nothing in between.
There's actually an increasing number of people internally at Anthropic that are using a lot of credits, spending over $1,000 every month. We see this power user behavior. This is something that they teach in YC. If you can solve your own problem, it's much more likely you're solving the problem for others. There's this really old idea in product called latent demand. You build a product in a way that is hackable, that is open-ended enough that people can abuse it for other use cases it wasn't really designed for. And you build for that because you know there's demand for it.
Do you think the CLI is the final form factor? Are we going to be using Claude Code in the CLI primarily in a year or in 3 years, or is there something else that's better? Kat, Boris, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So for people who don't know you, you are the creators of Claude Code. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. I love Claude Code.
That's amazing to hear. That's what we love to hear.
I think the place I want to start is when I first used it, there was this moment. I think it was around when Sonnet 3.7 came out where I was, holy shit, this is a completely new paradigm. It's a completely new way of thinking about code. And the big difference was you went all the way and just eliminated the text editor, and you're just, all you do is talk to the terminal, and that's it. And previous paradigms of AI programming, previous harnesses have been, you have a text editor and you have the AI on the side, and it's kind of, or it's a tab complete. So take me through that decision process, that process of architecting this new paradigm. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is it was not intentional at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
we sort of ended up with it. So at the time when I joined Anthropic, we were still on different teams at the time. There was this previous predecessor to Claude Code. It was called Clyde, like CLIDE at Anthropic. And it was this research project. It took a minute to start up. It was this kind of really heavy Python thing. It had to run a bunch of indexing and stuff. And when I joined, I wanted to ship my first PR. And I hand wrote it, a noob in a time. I didn't know about any of these tools.
Thanks for admitting that on the podcast.
I didn't know any better. And then I put up this PR, and Adam Wolf, who was the eng manager for our team for a while, he was my ramp-up buddy, and he just rejected the PR. And he was like, "You wrote this by hand? What are you doing? Use Clyde." Because he was also hacking a lot on Clyde at the time. And so I tried Clyde. I gave it the description of the task, and it just one-shotted this thing. And this was Sonnet 3.5, so I still had to fix the thing even for this kind of basic task. And the harness was super old, so it took 5 minutes to churn this thing out, and just took forever. But it worked, and I was just mind blown that this was even possible. And they just kind of got the gears turning. Maybe you don't actually need an IDE. And then later on, I was prototyping using the Anthropic API. And the easiest way to do that was just building a little app in the terminal, because that way I didn't have to build a UI or anything. And I started just making a little chat app. And then I just started thinking maybe we could do something a little bit like Clyde. So let me build like a little Clyde. And it actually ended up being a lot more useful than that without a lot of work. And I think the biggest revelation for me was when we started to give the model tools, they just started using tools. And it was this insane moment. The model just wants to use tools. We gave it Bash, and it just started using Bash, writing AppleScript to automate stuff in response to questions. And this is just the craziest thing. I've never seen anything like this. Because at the time, I had only used IDEs, so text editing, a little one-line autocomplete, multi-line autocomplete, whatever. So that's where this came from. It was this kind of convergence of prototyping, but also kind of seeing what's possible in kind of a very rough way. And this thing ended up being surprisingly useful. And I think it was the same for us. I think for me, it was kind of Sonnet 4, Opus 4. That's where that magic moment was. Where it was, oh my God, this thing works.
That's interesting. So tell me about the tool moment, because I think that is one of the special things about Claude Code is it just writes Bash and it's really good at it. And I think a lot of previous agent architectures, or even anyone building an agent today, your first instinct might be, okay, we're going to give it a find file tool, and then we're going to give it a open file tool, and you build all these custom wrappers for all the different actions you might want the agent to take. But Claude Code just uses Bash, and it's really good at it. So how do you think about what you learned from that?
Yeah, I think we're at this point right now where Claude Code actually has a bunch of tools. I think it's a dozen or something. We actually like add and remove tools most weeks. So this changes pretty. But today there actually is a search. There's a tool for searching. And we do this for two reasons. One is the UX, so we can show the result a little bit nicer to the user because there's still a human in the loop right now for most tasks. And the second one is for permissions. So if you say in your Claude Code settings.json, this file you cannot read, we have to kind of enforce this. We enforce it for Bash, but we can do it a little bit more efficiently for if we have a specific search tool. But definitely we want to unship tools and kind of keep it simple for the model. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we unshipped the LS tool because in the past we needed it, but then we actually built a way to enforce this kind of permission system for Bash. So in Bash, if we know that you're not allowed to read a particular directory, Claude's not allowed to ls that directory. And because we can enforce that consistently, we don't need this tool anymore. And this is nice because it's a little less choice for Claude, a little less stuff in context.
Got it. And how do you guys split responsibility on the team?
I would say Boris sets the technical direction and has been the product visionary for a lot of the features that we've come out with. I see myself as more of a supporting role to make sure that our pricing and packaging resonates with our users, two, making sure that we're shepherding all our features across the launch process. So from deciding, all right, these are the prototypes that we should definitely ant-food, to setting the quality threshold for ant-fooding, through to communicating that to our end users. And there's definitely some new initiatives that we're working on that I would say historically a lot of Claude Code has been built bottoms up. Boris and a lot of the core team members have just had these great ideas for to-do lists, sub-agents, hooks. All of these are bottoms up. As we think about expanding to more surfaces and bringing Claude Code to more places, I think a lot of those are more, all right, let's talk to customers, let's bring engineers into those conversations and prioritize those surfaces and knock them out.
Got it. What is antfooding?
Oh, antfooding is...
Oh, antfooding?
Oh, it means dog fooding. Okay. So...
Anthropic ants.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, our nickname for internal employees is Ant. And so antfooding is our version of dog fooding. Internally, over, I think, 70 or 80% of ants, technical Anthropic employees, use Claude Code every day. Yeah. And so every time we are thinking about a new feature, we push it out to people internally, and we get so much feedback. Yeah. We have a feedback channel. I think we get a post every 5 minutes. And so you get really quick signal on whether people like it, whether it's buggy, or whether it's not good and we should unship it.
You can tell. You can tell that someone that is building stuff is using it all the time to build it, because its ergonomics just makes sense if you're trying to build stuff, and that only happens if you're ant-fooding. I think that's a really interesting paradigm for building new stuff that sort of bottoms up. I make something for myself. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and Kat is also so humble. I think Kat has a really big role in the product direction also. It comes from everyone on the team. And these specific examples, this actually came from everyone on the team. To-do lists and sub-agents, that was Sid, hooks, yeah. Dixon shipped that, plugins, Daisy shipped that. So everyone on the team, these ideas come from everyone. And so I think for us, we build this core agent loop and this kind of core experience. And then everyone on the team uses the product all the time. And so everyone outside the team uses the product all the time. And so there's just all these chances to build things that serve these needs. For example, bash mode, the exclamation mark, and you can type in bash commands. This was just like many months ago. I was using Claude Code and I was going back and forth between two terminals and just thought it was kind of annoying. And just on a whim, I asked Claude to kind of think of ideas. I thought of this like exclamation mark bash mode. And then I was like, great, make it pink and then ship it. it just did it. That's the thing that still kind of persisted. And now you see kind of others also kind of catching on to that.
That's funny. I actually didn't know that. And that's extremely useful because I always have to open up a new tab to run any bash commands. So you just do an exclamation point and then it just runs it directly instead of filtering it through all the Claude stuff.
Yeah, and Claude Code sees the full output too.
Interesting. That's perfect.
So anything you see in the Claude Code view, Claude Code also sees.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And this is kind of a UX thing that we're thinking about. In the past, tools were built for engineers, but now it's equal parts engineers and model. And so as an engineer, you can see the output, but it's actually quite useful for the model also. And this is part of the philosophy also, like everything is dual use. So for example, the model can also call slash commands. So I have a slash command for slash commit, where I run through kind of a few different steps like diffing and generating a reasonable commit message and this kind of stuff. I run it manually, but also Claude can run this for me. And this is pretty useful because we get to share this logic. We get to kind of define this tool, and then we both get to use it.
Yeah. What are the differences in designing tools that are dual use from designing tools that are used by one or the other?
Surprisingly, it's the same.
Okay.
So far. Yeah. I sort of feel like this kind of elegant design for humans translates really well to the models.
So you're just thinking about what would make sense to you, and the model generally, it makes sense to the model too, if it makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think one of the really cool things about Claude Code being a terminal UI and what made it work really well is that Claude Code has access to everything that an engineer does at the terminal. Yeah. And I think when it comes to whether the tool should be dual use or not, I think making them dual use actually makes the tools a lot easier to understand. It just means that, okay, everything you can do, Claude Code can do, there's nothing in between.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, there are a couple of those decisions. So no code editor. It's in the terminal, so it has access to your files, and it's on your computer versus like in the cloud in a virtual machine. So you get repeated. You get to use it in a repeated way where you can build up your Claude MD file or build slash commands and all that kind of stuff, where it becomes very composable and extensible from a very simple starting point. And I'm curious about how you think about, for people who are thinking about, okay, I want to build an agent, I want to build probably not Claude Code, but like something else, how you get that simple package that then can extend and be really powerful over time.
For me, I'd start by just thinking about it like developing any kind of product where you have to solve the problem for yourself before you can solve it for others. And this is something that they teach in YC, is you have to start with yourself. So if you can solve your own problem, it's much more likely you're solving the problem for others. And I think for coding, starting locally is the reasonable thing. And now we have Claude Code on the web, so you can also use it with a virtual machine, and you can use it in a remote setting. And this is super useful when you're on the go. You want to take something off from your phone. And this is sort of, we started proving this out kind of a step at a time, where you can do @Claude in GitHub. And I use this every day. On the way to work, I'm like, at a red light. I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I'm like, on GitHub, at a red light. And then I'm like, @Claude, fix this issue or whatever. And so it's just really useful to be able to control it from your phone. And this kind of proves out this experience. I don't know if this necessarily makes sense for every kind of use case. For coding, I think starting local is right. I don't know if this is true for everything, though.
Got it. What are the slash commands you guys use?
/PR commit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the PR commit / command makes it a lot faster for Claude to know exactly what bash commands to run in order to make a commit.
And what does the PR commit / command do for people who aren't familiar?
Oh, it just tells it exactly how to make it.
Okay.
And you can you can say like, okay, these are the 3 bash commands that need to be.
Got it.
And what's pretty cool is also we have this kind of templating system built into / commands. So we actually run the bash commands ahead of time. They're embedded into the / command. And you can also pre-allow certain tool invocations. So for that / command, we say allow git commit, git push, GHPR. And so you don't get asked for permission after you run the / command, because we have like a permission-based security system. And then also it uses Haiku, which is pretty cool. So it's kind of a cheaper model and faster. Yeah, and for me, I use commit PR, feature dev we use a lot. So Sid created this one. It's kind of cool. It kind of walks you through step-by-step building something. So we prompt Claude, like, first ask me what exactly I want, build the specification, and then kind of build a detailed plan, and then make a to-do list, walk through step-by-step. So it's kind of more structured feature development. Yeah. And then I think the last one that we probably use a lot, so we use a security review for all of our PRs, and then also code review. So Claude does all of our code review internally at Anthropic. There's still a human approving it, but Claude does kind of the first step in code review. That's just a /code review /command.
Got it. Yeah, what are the things, I would love to go deeper into how do you make a good plan? So the sort of the feature dev thing, because I think there's a lot of little tricks that I'm starting to find, or people at Every are starting to find that work, and I'm curious what are things that we're missing. So, for example, one unintuitive step of the plan development process is, even if I don't exactly know what the thing that needs to be built is, I just have like a little sentence in my mind, like I want feature X. I have Claude just like implement it, just without giving it anything else, and I see what it does, and that helps me understand like, okay, here's actually what I mean, because it made all these different mistakes, or like, it did something that I didn't expect that might be good. And then I use that, like the learning from the sort of throwaway development, and just clear it out, and then that helps me write a better plan spec for the actual feature development, which is something that you would never do before because it'd be too expensive to just YOLO send in an engineer on a feature that you hadn't actually spec'd out. But because you have Claude going through your code base and doing stuff, you can learn stuff from it that helps inform the actual plan that you make.
Yeah, I feel maybe I can start, and I'm curious how you use it too. I think there's a few different modes maybe for me. One is prototyping mode. Yeah. So traditional engineering prototyping, you want to kind of build the simplest possible thing that touches all the systems, just so you can kind of get a vague sense of like what are the systems, there's unknowns, and just to kind of trace through everything. Yeah. And so I do the exact same thing as you, Dan. Claude just does the thing, and then I see where it messes up, and then I'll ask it to just throw it away and do it again. So just hit escape twice, go back to the old checkpoint, and then try again. I think there's also maybe two other kinds of tasks. So one is just things that Claude can one-shot. And I feel pretty confident it can do it. So I'll just tell it, and then I'll just go to a different tab, and I'll shift tab to auto accept, and then just go do something else, or go to another one of my Claudes and tend to that while it does this. But also there's this kind of harder feature development. So these are things that are maybe in the past it would have taken like a few hours of engineering time. And for this, usually I'll shift tab into plan mode and then align on the plan first before it even writes any code. And I think what's really hard about this is the boundary changes with every model in kind of a surprising way. Where the newer models, they're more intelligent, so the boundary of what you need plan mode for got pushed out like a little bit. Yeah. Like before you used to need to plan, now you don't. And I think this is general trend of stuff that used to be scaffolding with a more advanced model, it gets pushed into the model itself, and the model tends to subsume everything over time.
How do you think about building a agent harness that isn't just gonna, you're not spending a bunch of time building stuff that is just going to be subsumed into the model in 3 months when the new Claude comes out? How do you know what to build versus what to just say, it doesn't work quite yet, but next time it's going to work, so we're not going to spend time on it?
I think we build most things that we think would improve Claude Code's capabilities, even if that means we'll have to get rid of it in 3 months. If anything, we hope that we will get rid of it in 3 months. I think for now, we just want to offer the most premium experience possible. And so we're not too worried about throwaway work.
Interesting.
And an example of this is something, even plan mode itself, I think we'll probably unship it at some point when Claude can just figure out from your intent that you probably want to plan first. Or, for example, I just deleted like 2,000 tokens or something from the system prompt yesterday, just because Sonnet 4.5 doesn't need it anymore. But Opus 4.1 did need it.
What about in the case where the latest frontier model doesn't need it, but you're trying to figure out how to make it more because you have so many users that maybe you're not going to use Opus or Sonnet 4.5 for everything. Maybe you're going to use Haiku. So there's a trade-off between having a more elaborate harness for Haiku versus just not spending time on it, using Sonnet, eating the cost, and working on more stuff.
In general, we've positioned Claude Code to be a very premium offering. So our North Star is making sure that it works incredibly well with the absolutely most powerful model we have, which is Sonnet 4.5 right now. We are investigating how to make it work really well for future generations of smaller models, but it's not the top priority.
Okay. What do you think about, one thing that I notice is we get models often, and thank you very much for this, we get models a lot before they come out, and it's our job to figure out, is it any good? And over the last 6 months, when I'm testing Claude, for example, in the Claude app with a new frontier model, it's actually very hard to tell whether it's better immediately, but it's really easy to tell in Claude Code because the harness matters a lot for the performance that you get out of the model. And you guys have the benefit of building Claude Code inside of Anthropic, so there's a much tighter integration between the fundamental model training and the harness that you're building, and they seem to really impact each other. So how does that work in turn, and what are the benefits you get from having that tight integration?
I think the biggest thing is researchers just use this, and so as they see what's working and what's not, they can improve stuff. We do a lot of evals and things like that to communicate back and forth and understand where exactly the model's at. But there's this frontier where you need to give the model a hard enough task to really push the limit of the model. And if you don't do this, then all models are equal. But if you give it a pretty hard task, you can tell the difference.
What subagents do you use?
I have a few. I have a planner subagent that I use. I have a code review subagent. Code review is actually something where sometimes I use a subagent, sometimes I use a slash command. So usually in CI it's a slash command, but in synchronous use I use a subagent for the same thing. It's a good question. Maybe it's a matter of taste. I don't know. I think it's maybe when you're running synchronously, it's nice to fork off the context window a little bit because all the stuff that's going on in the code review, it's not relevant to what I'm doing next. But in CI, it just doesn't matter.
Are you ever spawning like 10 subagents at once? And for what?
For me, I do it mostly for big migrations. This is the big thing. Actually, we have, so this codery / command that we use, there's a bunch of subagents there. And so one of the steps is find all the issues. And so there's one subagent that's checking for Claude MD compliance. There's another subagent that's looking through Git history to see what's going on. Another subagent that's looking for obvious bugs. And then we do this deduping quality step after. So they find a bunch of stuff. A lot of these are false positives. And so then we spawn like 5 more subagents. And these are all just like checking for false positives. And in the end, the result is awesome. It finds all the real issues without the false issues.
That's great. I actually do that. So one of my non-technical Claude Code use cases is expense filing. So when I'm in SF right now, so I have all these expenses. And so I built this little Claude project that, or in Claude Code, that it uses one of these finance APIs to just download all my credit card transactions. And then it decides these are probably the expenses that I'm going to have to file. And then I have 2 subagents, one that represents me and one that represents the company, and they do battle to figure out what's the proper actual set of expenses. It's an auditor subagent and the pro Dan subagent. So that thing, the opponent processor pattern seems to be interesting.
It's cool. I feel when subagents were first becoming a thing, actually what inspired us, there's a Reddit thread a while back where someone made subagents for, there was a front-end dev and a back-end dev and I think a designer. Testing dev. There was a PM subagent. And it's cute. It feels a little maybe too anthropomorphic. Maybe there's something to this, but I think the value is actually the uncorrelated context windows, where you have like, these 2 context windows that don't know about each other. And it's interesting. And you tend to get better results this way.
What about you? Do you have any interesting subagents you use?
So I've been tinkering with one that is really good at front-end testing. So it uses Playwright to see, all right, what are all the errors that are client-side and pull them in and try to test more steps of the app. It's not totally there yet, but I'm seeing signs of life, and I think it's a thing that we could potentially bundle in one of our plugins.
Definitely. I've used something like that just with Puppeteer and just watching it build something and then open up the browser and then be like, oh, I need to change this. This is, oh my God.
That's
like
really
magic.
cool.
It's really cool. I think we're starting to see the beginnings of this massive, massive subagents. I don't know what to call this, like swarms or something. There's a bunch of people, there's actually an increasing number of people internally at Anthropic that are using like a lot of credits every month, spending like over $1,000 every month. And this percent of people is growing actually pretty fast. And I think the common use case is code migration. And so what they're doing is framework A to framework B. There's a main agent. It makes a big to-do list for everything. And then just map reduce over a bunch of sub-agents. So you instruct Claude to start 10 agents and then just go 10 at a time and just migrate all the stuff over.
That's interesting. What would be a concrete example of the migration that you're talking about?
I think the most classic is lint rules. So there's some lint rule you're rolling out. There's no auto fixer because this AST analysis is too simplistic for it. I think other stuff is framework migrations. We just migrated from one testing framework to a different one. That's a pretty common one where it's super easy to verify the output.
One of the things that I found is, and this is both for projects inside of Every and then just open source projects, it's if you're someone building a product and you want to build a feature that's been done before. So maybe an example that people might need to implement a bunch is memory. How do you do memory? Because we have a bunch of different products internally, you can just spawn Claude subagents to be, how do these 3 other products do it? And there's a possibility for just tacit code sharing where you don't need to have an API or you don't need to ask anyone. You can just be like, how do we do this already? And then use the best practices to build your own. And you can also do that with open source because there's tons of open source projects where they've been working in memory for like a year and it's really, really good. What are the patterns that people have figured out and which ones do I want?
Totally. You can also connect to your version control system. If you've built a similar feature in the past, Claude Code can use those APIs like query GitHub directly and find how people implemented a similar feature in the past. Read that code and copy the relevant parts.
Yeah, have you found any use for log files of, okay, here's the full history of how I implemented it, and is that important to give to Claude, and how are you implementing that or making it useful for it?
Some people swear by it. There are some people at Anthropic where for every task they do, they tell Claude Code to write a diary entry in a specific format that just documents what did it do, what did it try, why didn't it work, and then they even have these agents that look over the past memory and synthesize it into observations. I think this is the starting budding there's something interesting here that we could productize, but it's a new emerging pattern that we're seeing that works well. I think the hard thing about one-shotting memory from just one transcript is that it's hard to know how relevant a specific instruction is to all future tasks. Like our canonical example is, if I say make the button pink, I don't want you to remember to make all buttons pink in the future. And so I think synthesizing the memory from a lot of logs is a way to find these patterns more consistently.
It seems like you probably need, there's some things where you're going to know, you'll be able to synthesize or summarize in this sort of top-down way. This will be useful later, and you'll know the right level of abstraction at which it might be useful. But then there's also a lot of stuff where you actually, any given commit log, make the button pink, it could be useful for an infinite number of different reasons that you're not going to know beforehand. So you also need the model to be able to look up all similar past commits and surface that at the right time. Is that something that you're also thinking about?
Yeah, I think there could be something like that. And maybe I think one way to see it is this traditional memory storage work, MX stuff, where you just want to put all the information into the system, and then it's a retrieval problem after that. Yeah, I think as the model also gets smarter, I've seen it start to naturally do this also with Sonnet 4.5, where if it's stuck on something, it'll just naturally start looking, like we talked about before, like using bash spontaneously to just look through Git history and be, oh, okay, yeah, this is an interesting way to do it.
Yeah. One of the things that we were talking before we started recording, one of the things that we're doing inside of I feel it has really changed the way that we do engineering, because everyone Claude Code pilled, CLI pilled. And we have this engineering paradigm that we call compounding engineering, where in normal engineering, every feature you add, it makes it harder to add the next feature. And in compounding engineering, your goal is to make the next feature easier to build from the feature that you just added. And the way that we do that is we try to codify all the learnings from everything that we've done to build the feature. So how did we make the plan, and what parts of the plan needed to be changed? Or when we started testing it, what issues did we find? What are the things that we missed? And then we codify them back into all the prompts and all the subagents and all the slash commands, so that the next time when someone does something like this, it catches it, and that makes it easier. And that's why for me, for example, I can hop into one of our code bases and start being productive, even though I don't know anything about how the code works, because we have this built up system of all the stuff that we've learned as we've implemented stuff. But we've had to build that ourselves. I'm curious, are you working on that loop so the Claude Code does that automatically?
Yeah, we're starting to think about it. It's funny, we heard the same thing from Fiona. She just joined the team, and she's our manager. She hasn't coded in 10 years, something like that. And she was landing PRs on her first day. And she was, not only did I forgot how to code, and Claude Code made it super easy to just get back into it, but also I didn't need to ramp up on any context because I knew all this. And I think a lot of it is about when people put up pull requests for Claude Code itself, and I think our customers tell us that they do like similar stuff pretty often. If you see a mistake, I'll just be like, Claude, add this to Claude MD, so that the next time it just knows this automatically. And you can instill this memory in a variety of ways. So you can say, at Claude, add it to Claude MD. You can also say, at Claude, write a test. That's an easy way to make sure this doesn't regress. And I don't feel bad asking anyone to write tests anymore.
Right.
It's just super easy. And I think probably close to 100% of our tests are just written by Claude. And if they're bad, we just won't commit it. And then the good ones stay committed. And then also I think lint rules are a big one. So for stuff that's enforced pretty often, we actually have a bunch of internal lint rules. Claude writes 100% of these. And this is mostly just at Claude in a PR, write this lint rule. And yeah, there's this problem right now about how do you do this automatically? And I think generally how Kat and I think about it is we see this power user behavior. And the first step is how do you enable that by making the product hackable so the best users can figure out how to do this cool new thing. Right. But then really the hard work starts of how do you take this and bring it to everyone else? Yeah. And for me, I count myself in the everyone else bucket. I don't really know how to use Vim. I don't have this crazy Tmux setup. So I have a pretty vanilla setup. So if you can make a feature that I'll use, it's a pretty good indicator that other average engineers will use it.
That is interesting. Tell me about that, because that's something that I think about all the time. Making something that is extensible and flexible enough that power users can find novel ways to use it that you would not have even dreamed of, but it's also simple enough that anyone can use it, and they can be productive with it, and you can pull what the power users find back in the basic experience. How do you think about those design and product decisions so that you enable that?
In general, we think that every environment is a little bit different from the others, and so it's really important that every part of our system is extensible. So everything from your status line to adding your own / commands through to hooks, which let you insert a bit of determinism at pretty much any step in Claude Code. So we think these are the basic building blocks that we give to every engineer that they can play with. For plugins is actually so it was built by Daisy on our team, and this is our attempt to make it a lot easier for the average user like us to bring these / commands and hooks into our workflows. And so what plugins does is it lets you browse existing MCP servers, existing hooks, existing plugins, and existing / commands, and just let you write one command in Claude Code to pull that in for yourself.
There's this really old idea in product called latent demand, which I think is probably the main way that I personally think about product and thinking about what to build next. And it's a super simple idea. It's you build a product in a way that is hackable, that is kind of open-ended enough that people can abuse it for other use cases it wasn't really designed for. Then you see how people abuse it, and then you build for that because you kind of know there's demand for it.
Right.
And when I was at Meta, this is how we built kind of all the big products. I think almost every single big product had this nugget of latent demand in it. For example, something like Facebook dating, it came from this idea that when we looked at who looks at people's profiles, I think 60% of views were between people of opposite gender, so kind of like traditional setup, that were not friends with each other. And so, maybe if we launch a dating product, we can kind of harness this demand that exists.
That's interesting.
And for Marketplace, it was pretty similar. I think it was like 40% of posts in Facebook groups at the time were buy-sell posts. And so, people are trying to use this product to buy and sell. If we just build a product around it, that's probably going to work. And so we think about it kind of similarly, but also we have the luxury of building for developers. And developers love hacking stuff and they love customizing stuff. And as a user of our own product, it makes it so fun to build and use this thing. And so, yeah, like I said, we just build the right extension points. We see how people use it, and that kind of tells us what to build next.
For example, we got all these user requests where people were like, dude, Claude Code is asking me for all these permissions, and I'm out here getting coffee. I don't know that it's asking me for permissions. How can I just get it to ping me on Slack? And so we built hooks. Dixon built hooks so that people could get pinged on Slack. And you could get pinged on Slack for anything that you want to get pinged on Slack for. And so it was very much like people really wanted the ability to do something. We didn't want to build the integration ourselves, and so we exposed hooks for people to do that.
The thing that makes me think of is you recently you kind of moved or rebranded how you talk about Claude Code to be this more general purpose agent SDK. Was that driven by some latent where you sort of saw there's a more general purpose use case for what you built?
We realized that similar to how you were talking about using Claude Code for things outside of coding, we saw this happen a lot. Like, we get a ton of stories of people who are using Claude Code to help them write a blog and manage all the data inputs and take a first pass in their own tone. We find people building like email assistants on this. I use it for a lot of just market research because at the core, it's like an agent that can just go on for an infinite amount of time as long as you give it a concrete task and it's able to fetch the right underlying data. So one of the things I was working on was I wanted to look at all the companies in the world and how many engineers they had and to create a ranking. And this is something that Claude Code can do, even though it's not a traditional coding use case. So we realized that the underlying primitives were really general. As long as you have like an agent loop that can continue running for a long period of time, and you're able to access the internet and write code and run code, pretty much you can, if you squint, you can kind of build anything on it.
And I think at the point where we rebranded it from the Claude Code SDK to the Claude Agent SDK, there was already many thousands of companies using this thing. And a lot of those use cases were not about coding. So it's both internally and externally. We kind of saw that.
It's like health assistants, like financial analysts, legal assistants. It was pretty broad.
Yeah. What are the coolest ones?
I feel like actually you had Noah Breyer on the podcast recently. I thought the Obsidian kind of mind mapping note keeping use case is really cool. It's fun. It's insane how many people use it for this.
Yeah.
This particular combination. I think some other some coding or kind of coding adjacent use cases that are kind of cool is we have this issue tracker for Claude Code. The team's just constantly underwater trying to keep up with all the issues coming in. There's just so many. And so Claude dedupes the issues and it automatically finds duplicates and it's extremely good at it. It also does first pass resolution. So usually when there's an issue, it'll proactively put up a PR internally, and this is a new thing that Inigo on the team built. So this is pretty cool. There's also like on-call and kind of collecting signals from other places, like getting Sentry logs and getting logs from BigQuery and kind of collating all this. Claude's just really good at doing this because it's all just bash in hand. And so these are all kind of these internal use cases that I saw.
Is it so when it's collating logs or debugging issues, is that you have Claude's continually running in the background, and is that something that you're building for?
It gets triggered, for that particular one, it gets triggered whenever a new issue is filed. So it runs once, but it can choose to run for as long as it...
Got it. What about the idea of Claude's always running?
Ooh, proactive Claudes. I think it's definitely where we want to get to. I would say right now, we're very focused on making Claude Code incredibly reliable for like individual tasks. And if you think about like multi-line autocomplete and then single turn agents, and then now we're working on Claude Code that can be tasks, I feel like if you trace this curve, eventually you go to even higher levels of abstraction, like even more complicated tasks. And then hopefully the next step after that is a lot more proactivity. So just understanding what your team's goals are, what your goals are, being able to say, hey, I think you probably want to try this feature, and here's a first pass at the code, and here are the assumptions I made, and are these correct?
I can't wait. And I think probably right after that is Claude is now your manager.
Oh, no. That's not in the plan.
So everyone on the team was super excited that we were talking today, and they gave me a bunch of questions, and I want to make sure I hit all of the questions. Oh, here's a good one. Why did you choose agentic RAG over vectors in your architecture, and are vector embeddings still relevant?
So actually, initially we did use vector embeddings. They're just really tricky to maintain because you have to continuously reindex the code, and they might get out of date, and you have local changes, so those need to make it in. And then as we thought about what does it feel like for an external enterprise to adopt it, we realized that this exposes a lot more surface area and security risk. We also found that actually Claude Code is really good, and Claude models are really good at agentic search. So you can get to the same accuracy level with agentic search, and it's just a much cleaner deployment story.
That's really interesting.
If you do want to bring semantic search to Claude Code, you can do so via an MCP tool. So if you want to manage your own index and expose an MCP tool that lets Claude Code call that would work.
What do you think are the top MCPs to use with Claude Code?
Puppeteer and Playwright are pretty high up there.
Definitely, yeah.
Sentry has a really good one. Has a really good one.
Do you think that there are any power user tips that you see people inside of Anthropic or other people who are big power inside of organizations that are big Claude Code power users that people don't know about but they should?
One thing that Claude Code doesn't naturally like to do, but that I personally find very useful, is Claude Code doesn't naturally like to ask questions. But if you're brainstorming with a thought partner, a collaborator, usually you do ask questions back and forth to each other. And so this is one of the things that I like to do, especially in plan mode. I'll just tell Claude Code, hey, we're just brainstorming this thing. Please ask me questions. If there's anything you're unsure about, I want you to ask questions, and it'll do it. And I think that actually helps you arrive at a better answer.
There's also so many tips that we can share. I think there's a few really common mistakes I see people make. One is, like you said, not using plan mode enough. This is just super important. And I think this is people that are new to agentic coding. They assume this thing can do anything, and it can't. It's not that good today. And it's going to get better. But today, it can one-shot some tasks. It can't one-shot most things. And so you have to understand the limits, and you have to understand where you get in the loop. And so something like plan mode, it can 2-3x success rates pretty easily if you land on the plan first. Other stuff that I've seen power users do really well is companies that have really big deployments of Claude Code, and now, luckily there's a lot of these companies, so we can learn from them. Having settings JSON that you check into the code base is really important, because you can use this to pre-allow certain commands, so you don't get permission prompted every time, and also to block certain commands. Let's say you don't want web fetch or whatever. And this way, as an engineer, I don't get prompted, and I can check this in and share it with the whole team so everyone gets to use it.
I get around that by just using dangerously skip permissions.
Yeah, we have this here, but we don't recommend it. It's a model. It can do weird stuff. I think another cool use case that we've seen is people using stop hooks for interesting stuff. So stop hook runs whenever the turn is complete. So the assistant did some tool calls back and forth with whatever, and it's done, and it returns control back to the user. Then we run the stop hook. And so you can define a stop hook that's, if the tests don't pass, return the text, keep going. And essentially, it's you can just make the model keep going until the thing is done. And this is just insane when you combine it with the SDK and this programmatic usage. This is a stochastic thing. It's a non-deterministic thing. But with scaffolding, you can get these deterministic outcomes.
So you guys started this sort of this CLI paradigm shift. Do you think the CLI is the final form factor? Are we going to be using Claude Code in the CLI primarily in a year or in 3 years, or is there something else that's better?
It's not the final form factor, but we are very focused on making sure the CLI is the most intelligent that we can make it, and that's as customizable as possible. You can talk about the next form factors.
Yeah. Kat's asking me to talk about it because no one knows. This stuff, it's just moving so fast, right? No one knows what these form factors are. Right now, I think our team is in experimentation mode. So we have CLI, then we came out with an IDE extension. Now we have a new IDE extension that's a GUI. It's a little more accessible. We have @Claude and GitHub, so you can just @Claude it anywhere. Now there's Claude on web and on mobile, so you can use it on any of these places. And we're just in experimentation mode, so we're trying to figure out what's next. I think if we zoom out and see where this stuff is headed, I think one of the big trends is longer periods of autonomy. And so with every model, we time how long can the model just keep going and do tasks autonomously and just in dangerous mode in a container, keep auto-compacting until the task is done. And now we're on the order of double-digit hours. I think it's the last model is 30 hours, something like this. And the next model is going to be days. And as you think about parallelizing models, there's a bunch of problems that come out of this. So one is, what is the container this thing runs in? Because you don't want to have to close your laptop.
I have that right now because I'm doing a lot of DISP. I've only read it, but DSPY or DISP prompt optimization, and it's on my laptop, and I don't want to close on in the Waymo with my laptop open because I don't want to close it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we visited companies before, customers that everyone's just walking around with their Claude codes. Is this running? So I think one is getting away from this mode, and then I also think pretty soon we're going to be in this mode of Claude's monitoring Claudes. Yeah. And I know what the right form factor for this is, because as a human, you need to be able to inspect this and see what's going on. But also it needs to be Claude optimized, where you're optimizing for bandwidth between the Claude to Claude communication. So my prediction is terminal is not the final form factor. My prediction is there's going to be a few more form factors in the coming months, maybe a year or something. And it's going to keep changing very quickly.
What do you think about, I teach a lot of Claude Code to a lot of every subscribers. And
Thank you.
You're welcome. doing your work for you. And I think one of the big things is just the terminal is intimidating. And just being on a call with subscribers being, here's how you open the terminal and you're allowed to do this even if you're non-technical is a big deal. How do you think about that?
Yeah, one of the people on our marketing team started using Claude Code because she was writing some content that touched on Claude Code, and I was like, you should really experience it. And she got 30 pop-ups on her screen where she had to accept various permissions because she'd never used a terminal before. Yeah. So I completely see eye to eye with you on that. It's definitely hard for non-engineers, and there's even some engineers we found who aren't fully comfortable with working day-to-day in the terminal. Our VS Code GUI extension is our first step in that direction because you don't have to think about the terminal at all. It's a traditional interface with a bunch of buttons. I think we are working on more graphical interfaces. So Claude Code on the web is a GUI. I think that actually might be a good starting point for people who are less technical.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was this magic moment maybe a few months ago where we walked into the office and some of the data scientists at Anthropic sit right next to the Claude Code team. And the data scientists just had Claude Code running on their computers. And I was like, what is this? How did you figure this out? I think it was Brandon. I was the first one to do it. And he was like, oh yeah, I just installed it. I work on this product, so I should use it. And I was, oh my God. So he figured out how to use a terminal and Node.js. He hasn't really done this workflow before. Obviously very technical. So I think now we're starting to see all these code adjacent functions. People use Claude Code. And yeah, it's interesting. From a latent demand point of view, these are people hacking the product, so there's demand to use it for this. And so we want to make it a little bit easier with more accessible interfaces. But at the same time, for us, for Claude Code, we're laser focused on building the best product for the best engineers. And so we're focused on software engineering, and we want to make this really good. But we want to make it a thing that other people can hack.
So sometimes Claude Code will write code that's a bit verbose, but you can just tell it to simplify it, and it does a really good job.
Interesting. And how and when are you doing that? So you're using a slash command, or you're
I just say it. I just say
every
simplify
time
it.
you're just
Like
saying
sometimes you're
simple.
hey, this should be a 1-line change.
Yeah.
And I'll write 5 lines and you're like, simplify it,
Mhm.
and it understands immediately what you mean, and
Yeah.
I'll fix it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people on our team do that too. It's interesting. Why not then, if you're saying that all the time, why not then push that into a slash command or the harness or something to make it just happen automatically?
We do have instructions for this in the Claude MD. I think it impacts such a low percentage of conversations that we don't want it to over-rotate in the other direction. And then the reason why not a slash command is because you actually don't need that much context. I think slash command is really good for situations where you would otherwise need to write 2-3 lines. But even for plan mode, you actually can use a few words, but it actually takes 2 or 3 lines to capture the entirety of what you want in plan mode. For simplify it, you can just write simplify it and it gets it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Okay, well, now we can. That's interesting. Yeah.
But this stuff, it still feels just so early. We were talking before the recording about where are we on the adoption curve, and it's still
The Hausschen curve or whatever. Whatever that term was.
Exactly. And it just feels we're first 10%. Still, this stuff is going to change so fast. It's going to keep changing.
Even when I talk to researchers outside of Anthropic who've used Claude Code, they also get stuck on things like not realizing that they can just tell the LLM to simplify it.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes to show that even for people who are working in this industry, they don't always realize that you can just talk to them.
That's the thing is I think that there's this underlying expectation that using AI shouldn't have to be a skill because it just does whatever you say. And you're like, well, whatever you say is going to matter for what it does. So if you can say things better, it's going to do better.
It changes with every model, though. That's the hard part. Prompt engineer was a job, and now famously it's not a job anymore. And there's going to be more jobs that are then not jobs anymore, of these little micro skills that you have to learn to use this thing. And as the model gets better, it can just interpret it better. But I think that's also, for us, this is part of this humility that we have to have building a product that we just really don't know what's next. And we're just trying to figure it out along with everyone else. We're just here for the ride.
And that's why it's cool that you're building it for yourself, because I think that's the best way to know that is just and this is what we do too, is you're sort of living in the future, you're using it all the time, and it's pretty clear what's missing. You're like, I just want this thing, and you can just do the next thing rather than being, let me ask some enterprise product manager at some gigantic company, what kind of AI feature do you want? And they're like, I don't know, put a little chatbot on the side of my IDE, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, this is the luxurious thing about building dev tools, right?
Yeah.
You're your own customer.
I think it's also really a unique thing about AI because it sort of reset the game board for all software. So we have Cora, this email assistant, and we have Sparkle, which organizes your files. And it's like anything that you do for something that you want to use on your computer, if you're building it with AI, there's a good chance that hasn't been done before because the whole landscape has been reset. And so it's a uniquely exciting time to build stuff for yourself.
Totally. I think it totally opens the playing field too. It's any individual can now build an app to fill their need and then distribute it to everyone.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I've been prototyping all these random pet projects. I just moved into a new apartment and it's empty. And so I've been building this shopping advisor assistant on the Claude Agent SDK, because who has time to read all the reviews and look at all the options and find their pricing, and everything's really hard to discover. And so it just asks me a bunch of questions and I tell it what I want. And
Like
it
for
shows me a bunch
furniture?
of, yeah, exactly. And it shows me a bunch of photos of different sofas and options and what people say online. And then I tell it what I don't like. And it literally feels working with a shopping assistant. And it's been really cool.
That's really cool.
I also have my little email response agent that drafts responses for me, but I don't use email that much, so it's kind of
I knew it
withered.
wasn't you responding.
That's why it's 7 days delayed. The agent's just doing a very thorough job. The agent SDK is cool though.
Yeah, okay, it's cool. Yeah, it always just feels amazing how much we're able to build with such a small team.
Yeah.
So I feel
The other thing that's really cool is that I think people are just shifting their mindset from docs to demos. Internally, our currency is actually demos.
Yeah.
You want people to be excited about your thing?
Yeah.
Show us 15 seconds of what it can do.
Yeah.
And we find that everyone on the team now has this indoctrinated in
Demo
them.
culture for sure. And I
Yeah.
think that's better because there's a lot of things that you might have in your head that if you're a great writer, maybe you could figure out how to explain it, but it's just, even then, it's just really hard to explain. But if someone can see it, they'll get it immediately. And I think that's happening for product building, but it's also happening for all sorts of other types of creative endeavors, like making a movie, for example. Like you had to pitch it, but now you can just be like, I made this sort of video, and check. You can see a glimmer of the thing you're trying to make for very cheap. And so that means you don't have to spend time convincing people as much. You can just be like, here, I made it.
Yeah, no, and also as a builder, you can just make it and then make it again and then make it again,
Yeah.
until you're happy.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I feel the flip side is like, you used to make a doc or whiteboard something, or I would draw stuff in Sketch or Figma or whatever, and now we'll just build it until I like how it feels. And it's just so easy to get that feeling out of it now. And I think you could see it visually before, or you could describe it in words, but it's you could never get the vibe. And now the vibe is really easy.
Yeah.
And you built plan mode 3 times.
Yeah.
Because of this.
You built it and then you threw it out and rebuilt it and then threw it out and rebuilt it.
Yeah, or To-Do's, Sid built the original version, also he built 3 or 4 prototypes, and then I prototyped maybe 20 versions after that in a day. Yeah, I think this is a lot of pretty much everything we released, there was at least a few prototypes behind it.
How do you keep track of and carry forward the things you learn from prototype to prototype? And especially if it's one person is prototyping it and then you're like, I'm going to take it over, I'm going to do 20 more. How do you maximize what you get out of that?
There's maybe a few elements of it. One is the style guide. So there's some elements of style that we discover, and I think a lot of this is building for the terminal, or we're discovering a new design language for the terminal and building it as we go. And I think some of this you can codify in a style guide. So this is our Claude MD. But then there's this other part of it that's product sense, where I don't think the model totally gets it yet. And I think maybe we should be trying to find ways to teach the model this product sense about this works and this doesn't. Right? Because in product, you want to solve the person's problem in the simplest way possible, and then delete everything else that's not that, and just get everything out of the way. So you align the product to the intent as cleanly as possible. And maybe the model doesn't totally get that yet.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel what it's to use Claude Code. The model doesn't use Claude Code.
Yeah. And so I think when Claude Code can test itself and it can use itself, and we do this when developing, and it can see UI bugs and things that, I don't know, maybe we should just try prompting it though. It could, honestly, a lot of the stuff is as simple as that. When there's some new idea, usually you just prompt it, and often it just works. Maybe we should just try that.
A lot of the prototypes are actually the UX interactions. And so I think once we discover a new UX interaction like Shift Tab for auto accept, I think Boris figured out. Then
that was Igor, actually.
Oh, Igor.
Yeah, we went back and forth.
Things can fit into that.
We did dueling prototypes for a week.
Yeah, Shift Tab felt really nice. And then one of the now current plan mode iteration uses Shift Tab because it's actually just another way to tell the model how it should be. Yeah. And so I think as more features use the same interaction, you form a stronger mental model for what should go where.
Yeah. Or thinking, I think, is another really good one. Like first before we released Claude Code, or maybe it was the first thinking model was a 3.7. I forget what the first one was, but it was able to think, and we're brainstorming, how do we toggle thinking? And then someone was just like, what if you just ask the model to think in natural language and it knows how to think? And we're like, okay, sweet, let's do that. And so we did that for a while, and then we realized that people were accidentally toggling it. So they were, don't think, and then the model's, I should think. And it just started thinking. And so we had to kind of tune it out, so don't think didn't trigger it. But then it still wasn't obvious, so then we made a UX improvement to highlight the thinking words. Yeah, I saw that, yeah. And that was so fun, and it felt really magical.
When you do ultra think, it's like rainbow or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then with Sonnet 4.5, we actually find a really, really big performance improvement when you turn on extended thinking. And so we made it really easy to toggle it, because sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't, because for a really simple task, you don't want the model to think for 5 minutes. You want it to just do the thing. And so we used tab as the interaction to toggle it, and then we unshipped a bunch of the thinking words. Although I think we kept ultra-think just for sentimental reasons. It was such a cool UX.
Interesting. Do you think there's some new metric that's about what you deleted? And I think programmers have always felt deleting a bunch of code feels really good, but there's something about, because you can build stuff so fast, it becomes more important to also delete stuff.
I think my favorite kind of diff to see is a red diff. This is the best. Like whenever I see one, I'm like, yeah, bring it on, another one. But it's hard because anything you ship, people are using it, and so you got to keep people happy. And so I think generally our principle is if we unship something, we need to ship something even better that people can take advantage of, that matches that intent even better. And yeah, I think this is back to how do you measure Claude Code and the impact of it? And this is something every company, every customer asks us about. And I think so internally at Anthropic, I think we doubled in size since January or something like that. But then productivity per engineer has increased almost 70% in that time.
Measured by?
I think we actually measured it, in a few ways, but kind of PRs are the simplest one and the main one. But you said this doesn't capture the full extent of it, because a lot of this is making it easier to prototype, making it easier to try new things, making it easier to these things that you never would have tried because they're way below the cut line. You're launching a feature and there's this kind of wish list of stuff. Now you just do all of it because it's so easy. And you just wouldn't have done it. So it's really hard to talk about it. And then there's this flip side of it where more code is written, so you have to delete more code. You have to code review more carefully and automate code review as much as you can.
There's also an interesting new product management challenge because you can ship so much that you end up, it ends up not feeling as cohesive because you could just add a button here and a tab there and a little thing here. It's much easier to build a product that has all the features you want but doesn't have any sort of organizing principle because you're just shipping lots of stuff all the time.
I think we try to be pretty disciplined about this and making sure that all the abstractions are really easy to understand for someone, even if they just hear the name of the feature. We have this principle that I believe Boris brought to the team that I really like, where we don't want a new user experience. Everything should be so intuitive that you just drop in and it just works. And I think that's really set the bar really high for making sure every feature is really intuitive.
How do you do that with a conversational UI? Because when there's not a bunch of buttons and knobs and it's just a blank text box to start, how do you think about making it intuitive?
There's a lot of little things that we do. We teach people that they can use the question mark to see tips. We show tips as Claude Code is working. We have the changelog on the side. We tell you about, there's a new model that's out, or we show you at the bottom. We have a notification section for thinking. I think there's just subtle ways in which we tell users about features. I think the other thing that's really important is to just make sure that all the primitives are very clearly defined. Hooks have a common meaning in the developer ecosystem. Plugins have a very common meaning in the developer ecosystem, and just making sure that what we build matches what the average developer would immediately think of when they hear that.
There's this progressive disclosure thing. To any time in Claude Code when you run it, you can hit Control-O to see the full raw transcript, the same thing the model sees. And we don't show you this until it's actually relevant. So when there's a tool result that's collapsed, then we'll say use Control-O to see it. So we don't want to put too much complexity on you at the start because this thing can do anything. I think there's this other new principle which we've just started exploring, which is the model teaches you how to use the thing. And so you can ask Claude Code about itself, and it knows to look up its own documentation to tell you about it. But we can also go even deeper. For example, slash commands are a thing that people can use, but also the model can call slash commands. And maybe you see the model calling it, and then you'll be, I guess I can do that too.
Yeah. Interesting. How has it changed when you first started doing this? Claude Code was this sort of singular thing, the singular way of thinking about using AI through a CLI. Other people had stuff like this, but it felt this shift. And now there's a whole landscape of everyone is going CLI. How has that changed how you think about building, how it feels to build, and how are you dealing with the sort of pressure of the race that you're in?
I think for me, imitation is the greatest flattery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's awesome, and it's cool to see all this other stuff that everyone else is building and inspired by this. And I think this is ultimately the goal, is to inspire people to build this next thing for this just incredible technology that's coming, and that's just really exciting. Personally, I don't really use a lot of other tools, so usually when something new comes out, I'll maybe just try it to get a vibe. But otherwise, I think we're pretty focused on just solving problems that we have and our customers have and building the next thing.
Cool. Sweet. I loved this part of the interview too.
Did we answer all of your team's questions?
Good questions.
Did we get through all my team's questions? Let's see. I think we did.
I'm curious also how you would answer the unshipping question. Because also, if you're doing this kind of AI-driven development, you ship a lot. You have a small team, so it's a lot of operational load.
The reason I asked that is because I don't think we do a good job of that. And I have this feeling that some of the products are a little bit messy because of that. And I think particularly for Cora, there's just a big product surface area and it can do a lot of different things. We have an email assistant, so you can ask it, tell me about the trip I'm taking, and it'll go through all your emails and summarize the trip. Or we have this feature, it automatically archives any email that you don't need to respond to immediately. And then twice a day you get a brief that summarizes all the stuff that you probably need to see, but you don't need to actually do anything with, and you just scroll through it and you're done. And there's just all this complexity that around, for example, how are emails categorized? So now we have a whole view of, we have all these categorization rules and you can order them and whatever, but it's just complicated and hard to communicate. And I want to retain a lot of all the power and flexibility, but also you can't look at a screen and be, I have no idea what's going on. This is way too complicated. So I'm processing all that stuff. So the kind of deletion, unshipping idea feels an interesting cultural principle that we haven't really explored.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think there's a social cost to it too, where you kind of don't want to be the person who tells your coworker to unship their thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely tricky.
Yeah,
it's more than just the code.
Yeah, I definitely learned this at Instagram, honestly. Because I think Facebook does a terrible job at unshipping. And we had this problem where every time I think even unshipping pokes was really spicy because there's a bunch of these old timers. But if you look at the data, no one really uses it anymore. But for sentimental reasons, they were kind of tied to it. And so for Facebook, it always, maybe nothing ever got unshipped. It always got moved to a secondary place, an overflow menu somewhere that no one looks at, like graveyard. Yeah. And I think Instagram was just very principled. There was a very strong product and design point of view. That was like, if this thing isn't used by like half of people, 50% of WoW or whatever, we're just going to delete it and deal with it. And then we'll figure out some next thing that's used by more people.
I love it. Well, thank you. This was amazing. I'm really glad I got to talk to you, and keep building.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.